Now is the chance to use reliable energy to grow your money with the Dominion Energy Reliability Investment. Our new investment product offers competitive returns, no maintenance fees, and flexible online access to your money. Make the reliable investment in reliable energy. The Dominion Energy Reliability Investment. To find out more, go online to reliabilityinvestment.com. That's reliabilityinvestment.com.
Since the fall of man, a war has raged between good and evil. Over the centuries, this war has distorted the truth. Now the truth is perceived as lies, and lies acknowledged as truth. To this day, the battle continues as we investigate and debate the truth behind the history and mystery of the universe. We are Paratruth Radio.
From alien invasions to the impending apocalypse, from government cover-ups to the monkey man of Delhi. Today, we uncover some truth to the epidemic known as mass hysteria.
Now Paratruth presents Parahysteria with special guest co-host Kay Carswell.
What's up, folks? Welcome to a brand new episode of Paratruth Radio. My name is Eric.
And I'm Justin.
And we are, of course, once again, very happy to be here with you tonight.
Always.
We hope you're all having a wonderful evening, a wonderful weekend, and I hope you're looking forward to a great and wonderful week ahead, as it is Sunday night. I know it sucks that tomorrow's Monday, but hey, that just means one step closer to the next episode of Paratruth Radio.
Yeah. I mean, my Monday starts on Saturday, so I don't even want to hear people's, I've got the Mondays. So.
Oh, man. So today's topic is interesting, I think, because we've done topics similar to this in a sense, and sometimes it's really difficult to come up with strong explanations, to explain this type of, this topic that we're going to be covering today. And we're going to be covering mass hysteria. Now, there's a couple of different views on mass hysteria, and I think depending on who it is that's discussing it, their perspectives might differ from others. And of course, I think when we think of mass hysteria, one of the most important things is just how widespread mass means in hysteria, because some people will say, oh, an entire school, was on the same boat about something weird, and they consider that mass hysteria. But others will say, well, no, it has to be statewide or countrywide, et cetera, to be mass hysteria. So I think those are the kind of things we're going to be covering today. But that's just to give you guys a little heads up on what we're going to be discussing. Of course, we do have one of our good friends, special guest co-host today, Kay Carswell. So she'll be joining us in just a little while here to discuss this mass hysteria thing. But first and foremost, Justin, before we get into this and before we get Kay on the phone, I just want to ask you, in regards to mass hysteria over your lifetime, are there any particular moments in history that stand out to you that you witnessed as mass hysteria?
Nothing that sticks out at the top of my head in my lifetime. I guess it just kind of depends on the definition of mass hysteria as well, because like you said, typically you think big groups, but in my opinion, you could have 3 to 4 different people, and that's still considered mass hysteria because it's more than one person.
Right.
But as far as in my own personal history, not off the top of my head, I can't think of any.
Okay. Well, I'll mention one, maybe two that it'll spark to mind. One in particular is 9/11, World Trade Centers. Some mass hysteria at the point of which people were confused, at the time and curious as to who had done it, and they started pointing fingers, and some were blaming the government, some were blaming, a couple different foreign countries. Some were just saying that it was just, a terrorist of our own nation who is fighting against the freedom of the people, basically. It's a bunch of weird stuff. And I think at that time there was a lot of mass hysteria. People jumping to conclusions, and people were too worried, about all kinds of stuff, not just about whether or not to get on an airplane, but whether or not they should walk out the door. I know there was a time for a while where people just locked themselves in the house for weeks on end because they're too scared to leave.
Along with the anthrax attacks that happened after that.
Yep. Yeah. So, I think that's one example from our lifetime for mass hysteria.
Again, I guess it just depends on your definition of mass hysteria, because technically speaking, I guess, that would be mass hysteria because of what happened after that. But the actual event, I wouldn't say mass hysteria per se.
Well, no, you can't explain an actual event per se to be mass hysteria, because it takes a moment to start to allow the dust to settle.
Yeah.
In a sense, and really grip the bounds of where you're at and where you're standing in a situation. So, and then another mass hysteria, which I think is a little more modern, if you will, today and more current in our history, would be, of course, the election of Donald Trump. Now, of course, people are running around with their heads cut off like a chicken with their head cut off, freaking out about, Now, quite frankly, I can care less who's in office because, I tend to be negative. I think we're going to fail no matter who goes in office.
Well, and I've said this to numerous people, this election was just a huge
cluster?
Well, yeah, I was going to say shit show. Excuse the language, folks. But, it didn't matter who got in. I mean, you could say Hillary was better than Trump. People say Trump is better than Hillary. And I've told numerous people this at the beginning. I was going for Trump, but then he wanted to run his mouth, and it's like, okay, that just went out the window. I'm done with all of you people. You're not going to be worth my time for the country. So,
and the issue is, like, now that we're talking about mass hysteria, and in this sense, there's so many different views on what Donald Trump is and what he represents. Some people out there, in regards to the Christian side of things, some people are calling him an antichrist or the antichrist. And it's like, there's quite a few things that need to lead up to that event, and we're nowhere close to there yet.
I think one thing that I can actually comment on this is BDK from Omega Frequency Radio had posted something on Facebook, and he basically stated, from a Christian view, everybody's going to always say the next president is the Antichrist, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no. I mean, you can label him an Antichrist, but he's not. I mean, obviously he's not the Antichrist. The world's not coming to an end yet.
Right. Yeah, we're not there yet. But even still, let's say, all right, so he isn't the Antichrist. We're going to just lay that out, all right? I'm not going to say he is or he isn't, but he isn't. Yeah, you still have people. If that makes sense.
We're not going to say he is or he isn't, but he isn't. Okay, so.
So, moving on. It'd make much more sense for those of you who actually read the book of Revelation and study it, not just read, the top of the word. You need to dig in a bit. But, aside from the Christians, let's look at the LGBTQ community, for example. Here's another side of a certain people group who are just falling into mass hysteria because they believe, for whatever reason, that in a sense, not necessarily literally, but in a sense, Trump is going to be coming out of the gate with his axe, wielding it, ready to chop down lesbians and gays throughout the entire country, and this and that, so on and so forth. It's like, guys, chill the heck out, like, relax. It's nothing like you think it is, You
Going one step further with that is all of these high school students that were trying to get off. I don't know if they were like trying to get out of school, but they were trying to get special counseling because Donald Trump was elected. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did see that. And you know what?
And that is kind of a mass hysteria kind of a thing.
Exactly. It is. And jumping back to our 9/11 thing, because this is funny. I was on Facebook a few days ago and I saw a meme. And some of you listening might have seen the meme. You might have too, Justin. But it was a meme that showed a couple of the Twin Towers with a plane flying into them, and then showed a couple of school students. And they're like, the meme was something like, today high school students need therapy because of Trump. Our generation or whatever watched hundreds of people jump out of a tower to their death, and we're still standing here perfectly okay today. It's like the country, the nation has weakened. The children are weak. They're wusses. Simple as that. They have no backbone anymore.
Yeah. Well, I had just made the comment today to a fellow colleague that the following generation, I'm not too confident that we're going to be around much longer. But that's neither here nor there.
Oh, the founding fathers are rolling over in their graves like, oh, this is who we're leaving the country to?
The founding fathers have been rolling in their graves for at least 100 years.
For the last 100 years, though, at least it's been on their fingertips. Now they're just going to drop them all. Like, whatever. Anyway, folks, mass hysteria. We're going to get into this in just a moment here. But first, let's go to the line with our good friend, Kay Carswell.
Hey, guys. Thanks so much for having me on again.
Thanks for being on.
How have you been, Kay? Yeah.
I love it. I love coming on with you guys. Hi, everybody that's listening.
How have you been lately, Kay?
I've been doing all right. I've been battling the flu bug and all that, but I think everybody up here has.
I think that's, all around, yeah. I mean, I've been okay, but I know a lot of people that are battling that bug as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like everyone up here has it, and I'm still getting my voice back, but it's coming back.
Yeah. Well, that kind of goes along the lines of mass hysteria. It's mass, at least.
That's for sure. Everywhere.
Well, in a sense, actually, I mean, every time around the same time, during the year, in particular winter, once flu bug season comes around, I swear every single person I see on Facebook is saying, "Oh, I think I'm sick. I think I'm sick." You're not sick. You just stop it.
You're thinking yourself into being sick. Yeah.
Stop it.
You could pass someone and they'd be on the other side of the street. I mean, they could pass them on opposite sides of the street, and they would still think that they had the flu bug.
Yep.
They'll
Crazy.
say, "Oh, I feel feverish," or if you get the flu, you've got the flu.
Right.
There's no "I think,"
Well, and I don't encourage anybody to ever go get the flu vaccine because I actually don't believe in that. I mean, unfortunately, they're injecting you with the previous year's bacteria, and you're not fighting the current one because it always mutates. So sorry to tell you guys, whoever gets the flu shot, it doesn't work. Sorry.
There's over 5,000 different strains of flu.
And more happening every year.
Right, and they don't know exactly which one is going to hit during the winter.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you'd have a better chance of probably hitting the lottery.
Well, it is a hit or miss, but it's one of those where they find the most common strands and they typically inject you with the most common. But of course, there are the possibility of getting a few rarer bugs. But I don't know. I've heard both sides. I've heard people who've been getting the vaccine for years and years and years, and they very rarely ever get the flu. And then on the other hand, there's people who get it, time and time again, and yet they constantly get the flu. So I think it's really just a hit or miss. It can go either way depending on how the body, I guess, commits to it or rejects the virus.
See, Eric, that's just what they want you to think.
Yeah. See, this is mass hysteria right here. You're just trying to get people freaking out.
They do, and I mean, looking into this mass hysteria, you find out that a lot of it is propagated through the media.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's, what you see on TV and you hear on the radio, and I remember just maybe 5 years ago, they had this one flu that was attacking older people and about 15 through 18-year-olds. And people were lining up to get this vaccination. And it was ridiculous here. I mean, they'd said, well, they'd ran out of it and they'd order so much more. And we had people that were panicking about it because it was so bad. And I think we had a couple deaths in Indiana, but they were making it sound like every kid that got it,
yeah, absolutely,
elderly, was going to die.
Mm-hmm.
That's messed up. To me, that is another form of fear porn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the media is a huge part of mass hysteria. But before we get too far into it, I know you wanted to give everybody the definition of hysteria.
Yeah. It's really interesting when you look into it. Oh, boy, I lost it already. Oh, sorry. Oh, I love being on with you guys. Okay. Now, in sociology and psychology, mass hysteria, it's a phenomenon that will send a group of ideas or threats, and it will travel through the populace.
Mm.
So it spreads like wildfire. And then in medicine, it's the term hysteria is used as far as something spontaneous happening, like we were just talking about the flu,
Mm-hmm.
where it will manifest in a person physically.
Mm.
And another type of hysteria happens when a group of people believe they're suffering from a similar disease. Sometimes it's referred to as mass psychogenic illness or epidemic hysteria. Again, that kind of goes in with the flu and some other diseases.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so prevalent now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's almost psychosomatic for a lot of different diseases. Like, and this could be just like what people call sympathy pains. It's a psychosomatic reaction. So you feel like you're either sick or for example, maybe your wife's pregnant and you're craving food and you're like, oh, it's psychosomatic. Well, yes and no. I mean, you're craving food, but maybe you're just fat. I don't know.
There is a name for that. My ex-husband, when I was pregnant with all three of our boys, he would get a belly. He would have morning sickness. He had all the symptoms that I had. Once I had the kids, the belly went away.
Huh. Interesting.
It wasn't so much the cravings, because some of my cravings were pretty weird. I liked pizza with pickles, and that just kind of turned his stomach. So it wasn't the cravings, but as far as him actually growing into looking like he was pregnant and feeling like it, I thought it was kind of interesting.
I've never heard somebody going through that much of a psychosomatic change, no.
Yeah, it does happen, and I'd never seen it. You know, I'd heard of one thing here or there, but not with so much.
Right.
So beware, guys. Your wife gets pregnant, you're going to look like it too.
Well, I'm already getting there, so.
Shelly's pregnant?
No. I just look like I'm getting pregnant.
Oh, all excited.
So, Eric, we'll start with you about what kind of stuff did you come across with this for, like, different cases and other than what we mentioned earlier with stuff that's been happening recently.
Right. Well, you know, there's been quite a few different documented cases dating all the way back to the 1500s in which mass hysteria has played a significant role in human history. And some of them, which I'm not going to mention on air because it's a little weird. I don't want to say it, but I'll talk to you guys about it on break. But there's some that are just interesting. Like there's this one particular, they call it the Dancing Plague of 1518, in which it was a case of just dancing mania that occurred in Strasbourg, France. Now, apparently, numerous people took to dancing for days without rest, and it really began in July of 1518 when a woman named Frau Trophy began to dance fervently in the middle of the street. As days went on, between 4 or 6 days, more and more people began to join them. 34 people, then 40 people, etc., etc. Eventually, there were around 400 dancers after a month worth of dancing, and they were all just continuously dancing day and night.
Me, but also you. The Pharaoh fast forwards his favorite foreign film, Powder Donut. Okay, what's my line?
The only line I see here on the script is get options based on your budget with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive.
Oh man, that's a tongue twister, huh? I'm sorry, I'm gonna need a few more minutes. Bulbous Walrus, the Bulbous Walrus.
The Name Your Price tool, only from Progressive.
The owl ran afoul of the comatose coxswain.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Hi, it's Jonathan Cotton with the Good Feet Store, and you know what time of year it is? It's back to school time, and time once again for all of those after-school activities. Whether it's ballet or football, drama or field hockey, band or basketball, kids' feet need to feel good. Those cleats, sneakers, or shoes for band often don't do those young feet any favors. If our kids are going to stay active and healthy, then they need good feet. That means it's also time to take your kids to the Good Feet Store. Yeah, that's right, the young ones, the kids. Bring them into the Good Feet Store and let's treat them to some personal service. Our team members will measure their feet and find the right arch support for them. They can still wear the shoes they want, but they will have the support to make them comfortable now and keep their feet healthy for the future. It won't take long, and it could change their life. Go to goodfeet.com to make an appointment or just stop by the location nearest you. The Good Feet Store.
Many of the people, unfortunately, had eventually died from heart attack, stroke, or just complete exhaustion. Now, historical documents including physician notes and cathedral sermons, local and regional chronicles, and even notes issued to Strasbourg City Council are clear that the victims did indeed dance during that time and that the victims did die because of the excessive dancing. Unfortunately, there's very little as to why the dancing really began or why this woman, Frau Trophy, began dancing. But nonetheless, for some reason, it caught on and it spread pretty wide stream. It's pretty crazy. It's weird, you know?
Yeah.
And now whether or not that's considered mass hysteria, because we don't know what the hysteria is in this case, because we don't have an exact source. It's interesting, you know, how people just kind of, oh, that person's doing something, I should do it too, you know?
Yeah.
They look at it like it's the norm for them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think some of them realize that, and there's almost a connection between all of them as far as the psychological aspect. Would someone have been dancing that had a strong personality, or did these people more or less follow along, you know, like follow the leader type of thing to where they could be influenced more?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, and I don't know if you guys ever heard this particular theory before. I came across it years ago that, you know, putting people into insane asylums actually makes them turn more insane because they are surrounded by it, and therefore, in a sense, it infects them, which makes them even more insane. And that can fall under the lines of this mass hysteria phenomenon. And it just hearing that one story makes you wonder, was Mrs. Trophia mentally ill? And she just started dancing in the middle of the street and then just, quote unquote, infected these people? Possibly. I think that's a kind of 50-50 possibility. So it's kind of interesting to see that. The one that actually piqued my interest, I mean, there are a couple, but one that Eric and I have wanted to do a show on for a little while is the Salem witch trials. Mm-hmm. You know, there are people that believe that, well, the ones that started the whole witch trials, they believed they were hunting down witches and doing it for the greater good of Christianity, and how much fear they put into the entire populace that it turned into a mass hysteria where people were constantly being accused of being witches, and how many innocents really truly died just because of that.
It took them a long time to come around knowing that these people weren't witches.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a story made up that the kids were forced to pretty much come up with something or be punished.
Yeah.
And so the kids would say, well, you know, they were doing this and they were doing that, and that was it.
Yeah.
And it did spread. Everybody thought, oh no, we've got witches.
Yeah. No, and I mean horrible. That it could be possible that there's a spiritual aspect to that, but it still falls along the lines of mass hysteria as well.
Very much so.
So,
one of the cases.
Go ahead. Yep.
I'm sorry. I'd seen the movie on the Salem witches.
Oh, okay.
And it was fascinating. I mean, it started to when it went completely back to the beginning with Abigail Williams and her sister and Elizabeth. And they were only 9 and 11, and they were the ones that started to have fits. And they screamed, and the doctor blamed it on the supernatural.
And back then, that was kind of before the whole mental institution started taking over, where it was blamed more on supernatural or metaphysical compared to mental illness and disease. So...
I mean, in regards to just medical science, you know, it's come a long way since then. And we're thinking back, you know, back in the 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 1300s, et cetera, when we look around the world, we see a lot of cases in which people blame the supernatural or the paranormal. And we've talked about this numerous times on our show, and I'm sure, Kay, you've talked about it on your show. But I'm sorry to bring it up again, folks, but you know how I am. But you think of the werewolf, for example, you know, and it could be anything. It could be werewolf, it could be vampires, et cetera, et cetera. They all come from a base source of some kind of psychological problem or mental disorder, I should say, not problem, that someone has. And because they didn't have, doctors didn't have a correct or exact way of science to figure out that this person was simply ill, they stated, oh, this person is a werewolf. And of course that creates mass hysteria because the werewolf then spreads the legend, that and vampires spread. And it comes over to the Americas eventually. And now we have different legends in America, up in Wisconsin and down North Carolina, et cetera, in which werewolves exist supposedly. And it's interesting because we still see that happening today in a slightly different and twisted manner. But regardless, you know, people are always looking for some kind of fear factor, something to really jolt the nation or the people around them to get movement. And unfortunately, as we were talking about earlier with the media, that's why the media in America anyway uses fear so much, because people like it. People tell you they hate it, and yet they continue to tune into the news. You know, people feed off of fear. They enjoy that scare tactic, you know, and so the media continues to use it because it's money.
It's almost like an adrenaline rush for people.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never quite understood that. I don't like to be afraid. Well, I'm not afraid. That's just it. I'm not afraid.
Yeah.
But I don't understand it. You know, why would someone enjoy being, well, look who I'm talking to. You guys go to the Fear Fest. But, yeah, I mean, just going out of your way. And I think that the government does it a lot of time to control the masses. Again, it's that magician's trick. Hey, look over here. This is what's happening. But on the other hand, is actually doing something else.
And I mean, a lot of governments around the world have done that for centuries.
Mm-hmm. Get people whipped up into a frenzy, and they can pretty much do whatever they want.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, I found a case, and I remember this. Back in 1994, a woman in Riverside, California. Her name was Gloria Ramirez, and she'd been suffering from cervical cancer. And she took really ill, and they brought her to the hospital in an ambulance. And she had this strange toxic odor about her. And everyone that came in contact with her or tried to draw blood, they fainted. And I remember the news story on that. And they drew her blood, and they looked at it, and there were these little white things that were floating in the blood, like a manila-like substance. But they never followed up on the story. And then he started picking up different places where they would say, well, there was another person checked in that had this, and then they would drop the story. They would never give a conclusion to it. There was no end. So the people that were watching that wondered, well, we live in Riverside. Is that contagious? What is that? Yeah. And people were getting really upset and worked up. So medically, what was this? The woman, she died. She never left the hospital. And I remember the scenes. They took her out of the ambulance. They ended up putting the white hazmat suits on to deal with her. But when they got her in there, not everybody was in them, and those are the ones that started to pass out. That would be weird.
Yeah. It's all weird.
It is. You see all the doctors and nurses are passing out. Well, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and it's interesting that you said that they didn't follow up on the story. And so no one ever really found out what had happened to this particular woman, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to question, is this... there's a couple of different ways to look at it. You got to wonder if it's a tactic for the news network or whoever was covering it to purposely drop it that way to get people more interested and hence get on their website, create more feedback and more circulation within their website or wherever, anywhere.
There wasn't much of the internet, really wasn't big.
All right. Well, then you got people just talking, spreading news. You still got people interested in tuning into the radio, tuning into television, wherever to try to get more news. And so they're still making money off of you because you're reaching out. You're trying to hear more information, so you're tuning in every single day, right? Another option is that there's something really crazy going on, and they decided, whoever was in charge decided to cut the story because maybe it would have created a much larger hysteria issue if they continued on the story. And they thought maybe, hey, if we just drop it now, maybe people will kind of forget about it and we can continue to study this and figure out the cause without freaking a bunch of people out.
They tried to say it was toxic contamination, but there were 12 other people that were reported that ended up with the same, but you never heard their fate.
Who reported those then? I mean, who was that? Just people coming out and saying that they had the same symptoms, or was it actually the news network that was bringing up these 12? Or
it was the news network, but they wouldn't give specifics. But they were in the hospital. And when this Ramirez, she first went in, they ended up having to evacuate the emergency room.
Mm-hmm.
But these other cases ended up at the hospital too. But again, the amount of information coming out was so minute that you didn't know what was going on. I can remember that, and to this day, I still wonder exactly what that was about.
It's definitely interesting. It obviously we don't have any answers, and it's something that, like for you, Kay, might always be on your mind. And unfortunately, it's times like this in which you just kind of, you got to kind of try to let go and move on. Like, okay, well, maybe it just happened to be, somehow, some way the story got lost for whatever reason. Maybe something else overtook the story, a better, stronger story. But, here we are today in 2017. It's hard to say. We might not even have the same witnesses around anymore who had witnessed it. And it's unfortunate, but,
Yeah. All right, folks. Well, before we get too much further into it, we're going to take our first break here. You've been listening to Paratruth Radio. We will be right back with our good friend Kay Carswell talking about mass hysteria after Eric's Random Fact of the Day.
Now, Eric's Random Fact of the Day.
What's up, Parafans? Have you ever had a toothache? Perhaps you suffer from one now. Regardless, did you know that according to German legend, there is a safe and effective way to soothe a toothache? According to factslides.com, there is a German legend which was developed in the Middle Ages, which proposed that one option for getting rid of a toothache was to simply kiss a donkey. That's right, kiss a donkey. So, the next time your tooth is giving you trouble, just look for the nearest donkey, and hey, give him a kiss.
This was Eric's Random Fact of the Day.
All right, folks, welcome back to Paratruth Radio. My name is Justin.
And I'm Eric.
Okay.
Oh, and I'm Kay. Helps if I unmute the button, right?
And we've been talking about mass hysteria, and we got into a couple of cases, and Eric and I had talked a little bit earlier before we got Kay on about 9/11. We talked about the whole Trump issue going on right now, even today. One topic that I wanted to bring up is the issue still going on here in North Dakota is the DAPL pipeline issue that's going on with the native tribes and the DAPL company, and it's caused so much of a ruckus. And I'm not saying that it's not an issue, but it has caused people to choose sides, and instead of looking at it as a whole, they choose one side or the other and then just jump on the bandwagon. And to me, that kind of goes along the lines of mass hysteria. Now, I have chose a side. I've looked at it from both perspectives, but when you weigh out things like the natives' rights, big oil trying to keep going when we should really be getting away from oil, human rights being violated, and then DAPL hiring people to be protesters and cause a ruckus. So, in a sense, and this goes along the lines with the media as well, the media is causing so much of a hysteria about this as well and making people, making it worse. So, in my opinion, that falls along the lines of mass hysteria. Another one that I actually came across is, and this actually just happened recently, Charlie. And that was going on for, I'd say, well, it's probably still going on, but you heard numerous cases for months when it started in 2015.
Well, here's something that I want to mention that's, I think, interesting in regards to the whole oil and everything happening in North Dakota with the oil and the Native Americans. I remember when it first began, and you posted a couple things on Facebook. Shelley did as well, and a few others I've seen. But it was mostly like these memes or just a little article with a comment saying, "Why is this not being brought up in the media? Why is the news not covering this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?" And so then eventually the news catch wind. And what happens? They kind of blow things out of proportion. They change size. They manipulate the story so to get more viewers. And therefore, again, it's all about money. Bring in more money.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because now we have people who are complaining about how the media is wrong and how, they twisted the story and this and that. And it's like, but at the same time, these same people brought it on themselves by trying to get the media in on it because they don't know how the media works in the first place, at least here in America. The media in Canada is much better. You don't see nearly the same much of crap up in Canada as you do here in North America, or in the United States, I should say. So it's interesting how people are constantly pointing fingers and blaming one another when really all of us, to some extent, are to blame ourselves, depending on what it is, of course, depending on the story and, of course, the situation, et cetera, and whether or not you even had a hand in it. But
yeah. Well, yeah. And that's actually something I wanted to ask you guys is, do you think, like you had brought up the whole fear factor and adrenaline rush, do you think that the population as a whole, maybe even just the United States population, feeds into it so much that it causes mass hysteria?
I think that that's a really good explanation. They want to become involved. And, if you look at the riots that took place in Baltimore and Ferguson and all of those, there were people involved in that and the things they did that they probably normally wouldn't have done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a part of a belonging, like you said, with the dancing. They saw people doing it, and then they would do it. Some people, I think, just do it to be doing something.
No,
well,
that could be true too.
They might get their picture on TV.
Yeah.
Or in the news, with paper.
Me, but also you. The Pharaoh fast forwards his favorite foreign film, Powder Donut. Okay, what's my line?
The only line I see here on the script is get options based on your budget with the name your price tool from Progressive.
Oh man, that's a tongue twister, huh? I'm sorry, I'm gonna need a few more minutes. Bulbous Walrus, the Bulbous Walrus.
The Name Your Price tool, only from Progressive.
The owl ran afoul of the comatose coxswain.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
You might have noticed a change in your neighborhood lately. Yep, Sprint stores are now T-Mobile stores. Now that Sprint is T-Mobile, you get more coverage, value, and benefits than ever before. We've invested billions to bring our 5G from big cities to small towns across America. And great coverage is just the start. From high-speed mobile hotspot data to weekly deals and giveaways, our customers get tons of great benefits. Head to your new T-Mobile store to learn more.
Qualifying service and capable device required. Coverage not available in some areas. Some uses may require certain plan or features. See T-Mobile.com.
So they go along with it.
Right. No, and I completely agree. I think, I know I keep bringing this up, in regards to money, but in this case, it's just all compensation. People want to be a part of something, and the compensation is either meeting other people who are interested in the same thing they're interested in, getting on the television, getting on the radio, getting their photo taken. It's really sad, but the majority of these people that we see in all the riots that have already happened and many to come, I'm sure, most of them are just there just because they want to say, hey, I remember this time in history when I was at this riot for such and such. I've watched a number of different people, news networks, asking questions about Trump and Hillary, for example, when they were back when they were running. And most of the people that they asked questions of didn't have answers because they didn't really know anything about Trump or Hillary. And it's like, well, why have you been out here protesting? And they couldn't answer that either. So, I think you're right on the money there, Kay. I think a lot of people just want to be doing something. And in a sense, it's kind of a really bad thing because when the riots get out of hand and the police are called in, well, things start going south and it makes everything that much more worse. And then people start protesting the protest, and it's like, all right, this is just a pile of crud going on here. We got to figure things out, but.
Good point.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that I wanted to cover, because you had actually brought it up and I think we'll get in more depth with it next week, is the Orson Welles. Mm-hmm. So I wanted you to explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so, in 1938, Orson Welles decided to do this infamous radio program called The War of the Worlds. And now, when it broadcast along all the radio stream, he had no indication that this was just a make-believe story. And he purposely wanted to make the story to seem realistic. And so without anyone understanding, and of course people tuning in as well, like later on, would tune in and hear some crazy things about aliens invading Earth. And at first people thought, oh, this is just a crazy little radio program. It's just for fun. But then things started getting serious, and they had actors come into the studio and pretend they were getting killed by these aliens and they were under attack and so on and so forth. And it created mass hysteria in America. And at one point, which I thought was really interesting, there was a comment that came out that stated that the night in which this radio program was broadcast, it was considered the night America trembled, because over 1 million people who had tuned in actually began to commit suicide, began going out and getting stuff, supplies and whatnot, to barricade themselves in their homes or to get ready to fight the aliens that are coming to dominate America or the world. It was actually just crazy. And unfortunately, it wasn't until the next day that people learned that the whole thing was a hoax. And of course, at the time, there wasn't too many strong guidelines on radio to prevent something like this from happening. And even Orson Welles himself got into some significant trouble over it. But really, they had nothing that they could have done about it because the guidelines weren't strict enough to keep him from doing such. And I thought it was just, very interesting. And if anyone, I don't know if anyone has listened to it before. Justin, Kay, have you guys actually listened to the radio program?
I have.
Part of it. I haven't listened
it's
to
so
the whole
good.
thing, yeah.
Yeah, it's so good. It's amazing what, this guy, this filmmaker, is capable of doing over the radio to create just so much emotion and stir so many things. And of course, some very bad things happen because of it. And I don't think something like this would happen quite the same today because there are stronger guidelines. And I think people, well, that's hard to say because we're talking about mass hysteria. I was going to say, I don't think people are as gullible, but then again, there's plenty of naive people in this country and even in the world. But yeah, I mean, it's just completely insane. And there's a documentary on it as well. I think it's also called War of the Worlds. Just, you got to check it out if you guys haven't checked it out. Kay, what have you thought about this particular program?
I thought it was pretty intense for that time because there was, the time of the war.
Mm-hmm.
There had already been the event out in L.A. where they had that UFO sighting.
The Battle of L.A.
And there were just so many things that he tapped right in, like Stephen King can tap into that deepest part of your thoughts in your brain and know where your fear zone is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that is exactly what Orson Welles did. But did you know that the War of the Worlds was actually the third broadcast in history to be done to make it sound like it was a live event?
I didn't know that.
Mm-mm.
There's two previous to it that were done in the UK.
Okay.
And they took the same type of heat that Orson Welles did. And I think Orson Welles knew what he was getting into and what he was doing, but he was a breaker. He was a leader. He opened the path for those to be able to step into and step up the fear factor.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I think what's so inspiring about this is the fact if you, in regards to storytelling especially, or just doing stuff on the radio, like what we do, on the radio, there's really no limitations, Yeah, it was all just so amazing, and it seems so realistic to, even to today, when you listen back to it and you think of the time, it's like, wow, this is really something, like it. If I was living in 1938, I would probably believe the thing was real too, just by the way they did it, they spent so much time really choreographing and rehearsing the story. And it's not like they just had random people coming in either. They had actual actors coming in to broadcast. They worked with the Mercury Theater of the Air who came in and enacted the Martian invasion, and it's just like, wow, it's crazy what he went through. And yet, when we talk about mass hysteria, it's even more amazing how many people were so gullible to give into it. And of course, like you said, Kay, based on the time and what was happening, it only makes sense as to why the hysteria took place, why it spread as it did.
Yeah, and if you notice, too, even with the movie, we have 2 War of the World movies. And the first one sticks to what Orson Welles was trying to achieve in the studio. The second one with Tom Cruise,
right?
You have to look at that as a totally different movie. It resembles nothing like the original. But if you watch the new War of the Worlds and listen to the sounds in it, you pick up sounds that are being heard and reported today that people can't explain that they're hearing. So that movie tapped into another fear area.
Well, I think what that movie did was, other than just changing a little bit of the story, giving the creative rights, and all that, they're more than welcome to create War of the Worlds, make it in their own image in a sense. But I think tapping into those other sound effects and things that we hear more so today, or people claim to be hearing, really taps into the modern aspect of the War of the Worlds, because it's not 1938 anymore. We're in the 2000s.
Are you sure?
So,
Are you sure it's not 1938?
I don't think so. It could
Check
be.
your calendar.
There's time traveling is going to be one of the next shows we do, right?
Somewhere down the road.
Somewhere, you never know. Hey, for all I know, time might tick back after 2020. We're back at the first century again. But
we're using swords and shields and.
Hey, I've been saying that for years. I think we should go back to swords and shields and knives. Get rid of the guns. Just swords. Be men and women, go out there, fight in the war. Anyway, rabbit trails. I think War of the Worlds, the newest one, really just tapped into the modern aspect of what people expect today. Fear has changed over the years, over the centuries, over the millennia, et cetera, if you believe in millennials. So yeah, as time changes, so does everything else. Everything has to change to stay in pattern with the current mindsets of the people.
No. Well, one thing that, and this is getting into what I was going to talk about with my kind of thought process on this, and both you guys can chime in on this. We've talked about numerous cases, and we've all been doing shows that have a supernatural paranormal theme to them. And one thing that I had thought about, this has been actually since I had talked to Kay about originally doing the show while you were gone, is paranormal activity causing mass hysteria? Is mass hysteria causing paranormal activity? And, Eric, you and I have done the paranormal research thing and have come across things that can cause, in a sense, mass hysteria, or what you would call paranormal activity, with people thinking they're hearing noises, hearing voices, seeing things. So my question to both of you guys is, do you think it's one or the other? Do you think they can both affect each other? What are your thoughts?
You want to go first, Kay?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's like the people in the hospitals, or a school that they say that they've seen an apparition that appeared, and then other people start to see it. And I'm thinking that in some cases it's wishful thinking. They want to see whoever it is that they love get better, so they create this image in their head and say, well, but they don't realize they're doing it. They think they saw an apparition walk in a room and then their loved one is healed. Or they see the spectral in the school. And that will spread. And it could also be attention. They want, they could say, well, I saw this. And then everybody goes, you did? Wow, that's cool. Where did you see it? And then everybody else starts to see it.
Right.
So I think it depends on the mental makeup of the person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think to an extent I agree with you on that. I think also it really is a two-way street here. We've talked about opening doors in the past. Sometimes doors open on their own, though. I think a lot of people think, oh, well, spiritual elements, whether in this case we'll say demonic entities, will only come to if you open the door to them. But that's not always the case. We know for a fact that Job in the Bible never opened the door to Satan, and yet Satan showed up at his doorstep numerous times. And we see that a couple times throughout the Bible. And so I think even though I think some of it is all meant like just in their mind, they might see an apparition that isn't really there. I think there's other instances in which people kind of let their guard down, especially adults. Kids, we say in the paranormal a lot that kids are more open to experiencing paranormal activity because of their innocence, basically. They don't have that guard up or that filter, where adults, on the other hand, do have a filter. But I think when enough stories come through or someone that or you're really close with says, hey, I witnessed such and such, well, now that filters down because you're thinking, can it be real? Does it really exist? And then maybe that door opens to you as well. So, yeah, I do think it can go both ways. I think it's a two-way street.
So do you guys think it can be environmental as well, like affecting, like, for example, like I talked about the paranormal research, like massive amounts of electromagnetic waves causing people to see things and that sort of thing. Do you think environmental over maybe spiritual or mass hysteria is a factor as well?
Yeah, I think it can be. And I think it depends on the exact definition of environmental. But if we're talking about like electromagnetic fields, for example, or things like that.
I mean, it's man-made environmental, but
right, it's man-made environmental, but nonetheless, it affects the body, and there's scientific proof that it affects the body and the mind in certain ways when exposed to too much.
Right.
Another sense of environmental, and this is something I witness quite often, and I'm sure you know, Justin, because I write horror films.
Right.
That's my thing. I love writing horror, and so I'm constantly online looking at different images and stuff to feed my mind, which isn't always a good thing, but for the story purpose it is. But those images, they affect me, they do. And there's times where I'll have nightmares because of them, or I'll, just feel certain emotions because of it, because I'm so deep into some of the stories that I start living out the story in my own mind, and I'm like, I'm there.
I've read horror books or seen horror movies where I dream that I'm either in it or something to that effect is making me have these weird dreams. So yeah, I hear you there.
And so, in that case, it's like that's part of your environment. You're allowing that to be part of your environment, whether it's online or a book or something, and then you're becoming part of that environment. You're kind of entering it. So I think in regards to based on what your definition of environment is, environment definitely plays a huge factor.
When I was a kid and I would have nightmares, the way that helped me deal with them was to think I was watching a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And that helped me because, as a kid, there's that you get into like a type of hysteria with that. If you are used to having nightmares and then you wake up screaming, but if you can get your mind to think that you're just watching a movie,
mm-hmm.
It's all rewiring the brain.
Now, is that when you say that, is that like in your dream you're trying to think of yourself as watching a movie, or after you've woken up you think of it as just being a movie?
In the dream.
In the dream. Okay. So in this case, lucid dreaming, and that's assuming, the individual can actually have a lucid dream. And I know, like, not everyone does. I kind of go back and forth. Sometimes I have a lucid dream. Sometimes I just can't make a single decision, and I'm stuck in whatever situation I'm stuck in until I wake up. And it really sucks. But yeah, I mean, in those cases, like, if you naturally have a lucid dream, especially in something like a horror, a nightmare, like something that you said there, Kay, I think is really cool that you're able to think such a thing and then just think of it as a movie, because it probably really does help and did help you.
It did.
Yeah.
As an adult, especially since I've been doing the ministry and I've gotten so close to God. Sometimes we get messed with by the dark side. And they will, I know you both know what I'm talking about, and they'll penetrate your sleep state. And I have actually rebuked Satan in my sleep. And boy, does that take an effort. And I've had a sore throat for days because I was struggling so hard to do the rebuking and say the Lord's Prayer.
It's funny you bring that up, because Eric has a particular dream in particular that I remember, that he was praying in his sleep and rebuking in his sleep and woke up like mid-sentence and yelling it out loud. And Eric remembers what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
So that's actually kind of interesting that you bring that up.
It works.
It does.
And, that kind of gets into a whole other box of worms, is like, and, it kind of goes into nightmares versus night terrors and all this other stuff. But, it's kind of hard when you're having either a nightmare or a night terror to understand really what's causing it, because there have been dreams that I've had in particular, which, I've talked to you, Eric, about, that a lot of my dreams have become stories for me to write, because either they were so vivid that I can still remember them, or they're along the lines of, holy crap, that would make a great book, and I've never read a book that on this particular subject or storyline. So it's just one of those things, and I don't know if we'll ever come to a conclusion as to how do you tell, or what is affecting you when you're dreaming. So it's interesting to think about that as well, and that might play into a mass hysteria thing as well, because there are a lot of people that have never had nightmares, or they know a friend who's having nightmares, then they start having nightmares, then they tell somebody else, then that person starts having nightmares. So it's kind of a vicious cycle.
I want to ask you too, you both have made me remember something that caught my attention a couple years ago. It was going around on the internet. There was a sketch of a man, and it said, "Have you seen this man?" And this guy was showing up in different people's dreams, or they would interact with him in real life, and it was causing a mass hysteria. A lot of people didn't know, what was going on, but the ones who did or visited this website, then they started saying, well, yeah, I've seen that guy, or they'd see the picture and then come back and say, well, I just saw that guy today. And the guy wasn't good. He was not a good person, but I don't know if the website is still up or not, but it's, have you seen this man? Another weird one.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of reminds me of, and Justin and I, we talked about it a few weeks ago, but Slender Man, with that story. That's something that began as just a simple little story that some guy jotted out. And it really has spread to the point of murder, in at least one case. But people have claimed to dream about him or have nightmares about him, or that they witnessed him in their house or in the woods or wherever they were, and it's interesting because I think it's more so the imaginative state of a person's mind and perhaps the gullibleness in which people just happen to see things that aren't really there, but they believe that they're there, and it's hard to say one way or another because most of the descriptions are always eyewitness accounts. There's never videotape, there's never pictures, et cetera, et cetera. And even if we did have video or pictures, it's difficult to decipher whether or not they've been tampered with, without having a special eye or special software to debunk it. So I think what's interesting is a lot of people just go about life solely depending on other people's understandings and views of certain things, which then causes us, for myself, for example, to believe the same thing instead of researching it myself or really saying, oh, wait, this is just a story. There's no need to get all bent out of shape about this.
Like an urban legend.
Yeah.
There are so many of those, and that's how I saw Slender Man starting out.
Yeah.
And you even see pictures online that say, does this person, look like the Slender Man? And he's back in a play yard or a playground.
Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, and it's just it kind of goes along the lines of the story of Cthulhu as well. It was a story by H.P. Lovecraft, and it goes along to the lines of what inspired him to do that. He did write about a lot of dark things, so and it's become such of a life of its own that you never know anymore. You just never know what is going to happen. So, in a sense, all of that falls under mass hysteria because we're feeding into it and just making it this huge thing. So it's interesting to think about because now my mind's kind of going in a million places.
I wanted to ask you guys, we're all too young to have been alive during the McCarthy era, but are you too
I'm a time traveler.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I found that one interesting because I find so many similarities as to what's going on today. They had people turning their friends, their neighbors, their families in, saying that they were communist. And now we have the movement going on that if you think that your neighbor or your family or there's a person that could be involved with different activities, that they want you to turn on them. And see, back when this was going on with McCarthyism, it was a mass hysteria thing. It spread like wildfire. It ruined so many people's lives because once they were accused of being a communist, they never got their reputations back.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel that is trying to be achieved today. And a lot of people aren't willing to, they're shoveling it under the rug.
Well, it's interesting because, there's an old saying that is simply history repeats itself. And we saw you think of similar things back in Jesus' time, a little over 2,000 years ago, in which people were pointing out certain Christians, the Jews were pointing out certain Christians to be basically to become martyrs, they wanted them slaughtered, et cetera, et cetera. Yes. And we see it repeated over and over, and not always the same, slightly different, but still similar throughout time. And I think it's interesting because Jesus actually touches on it because he says that many things are going to happen over and over. The end of the world isn't going to just happen. There's going to be what's the word I'm looking for? Like birthing pains or something like that, earthquakes and certain conspiracies, et cetera, wars and famine and so on and so forth are going to happen over and over. Don't think it's the end of the time because these things have to happen before the end. And Jesus even goes on to say that he tells us Christians, don't call conspiracy everything that people call conspiracy. Because conspiracy is just that. It's a conspiracy. There's no truth behind it. It's just something that people want to believe. And Jesus specifically tells us, don't believe those things. Because those are the type of things that are going to pull us away from him. And get us focusing on things that just we really don't need to be focusing on. So, yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up. Because we are going through something similar like that. And, another 100+ years from now, we'll probably be going through it again, if not sooner. And it's true.
It's ongoing.
It's ongoing. It's constantly going to happen until the end of time. And I think in a way, and this is maybe a little difficult for some people to take, it's part of God's plan to set people off balance because only the true sheep of God are going to make it to the end. Others, however, are going to constantly be like, oh, it's the end times because such and such is happening. Okay, it's not the end times. Wait, no, it's the end times again. Oh, no, still not. All right, I guess it's never going to end. God must not exist because the end hasn't come like he says it was. And now those people are lost. But others will hold on and say, no, God said that these things are going to happen time and time again. Not to worry about the end time because we're never going to know when it's going to happen. He's going to come in like a thief in the night. We'll be unaware. It's going to happen, boom, like that, and we'll never see it coming. So, I think it's one of those things where we got to, instead of focusing on like, oh my gosh, our current situation is so bad and so on and so forth, it's, hey, look into the past. There have been millions of people who have been through the same exact thing, and look where we're at today in 2017. We've made plenty of progress, and progress is going to be made in the future. So it's like, just hold on tight. We'll get through it. Simple as that. I mean, I know it's difficult, but it's simple at the same time.
Just be prepared.
Yeah.
And you brought up Jesus, and, when he's standing there with Pontius Pilate, and he's already been scourged, and they ask him, or ask the people whether who they want to set free, Barabbas or Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a type of a mass hysteria, because these people were losing their mind, and they said to crucify Jesus and release Barabbas.
Mm-hmm.
So you had people that were there that were wanting Jesus to live, and then you had the others that wanted to crucify him.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at that with the way that you've presented things too, it is just a continual where you have one side against another side, and it's just hysteria.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and take our second and last break of the evening. We are currently talking with Kay Carswell about mass hysteria. We will be right back after Justin's Paranormal Headlines.
And now, Paratruth Radio's Paranormal Headlines.
How's it going, Parafans? Justin here with your Paranormal Headlines, and these headlines are from unexplainedmysteries.com. Creature photographed in garden at night. A Reddit user has uploaded an image of what appears to be a strange figure running through a garden. The photograph is one of two images that were taken by a light-sensitive camera approximately 2 seconds apart. The earlier of the two pictures, however, didn't show anything unusual. Nobody who was present saw anything in the garden at the time, and the anomaly only showed up on the image afterwards. According to the uploader, the photograph was taken by an elderly couple who had no knowledge of Photoshop or other image manipulation techniques. Intriguingly, the creature even appears to have a shadow, so if it really wasn't added to the image afterwards, then there must have actually been something physically present there at the time. This one strikes close to home, so I'd be interested in what you listeners think of this. Man tracks Bigfoot for over 7 miles. Experienced tracker Christopher Bauer followed a set of large footprints for miles across North Dakota. The incident occurred near Ellendale, Dickey County at Christmas after a family friend of Bauer reported seeing a large creature out of her kitchen window. She described him as a huge, hairy, ugly monster, and I guess that kind of describes it. If a Sasquatch is looking through the window at you, that's how I'd describe him too, he said. Bauer set off to track the creature through the snow, but soon found that its footprints, which measured 18 by 8 inches, went on for more than 7 miles. Picked up the trail down that way about 20 yards in, right in the open, and then crossed the highway and made his way to the hills, I think, he said. He has a 4-foot stride, and when he hits, he makes a deep impression. So it really wasn't hard to track him. It really wasn't. Sadly, though, despite following the trail for miles, Bauer ultimately failed to locate his quarry. The truth is out there. It's there. I know he is. I tracked him, he said. And this has been Justin with your Paranormal Headlines.
This was a segment of Paratruth Radio's Paranormal Headlines.
What's up, folks? Welcome back to Paratruth Radio. My name is Eric.
I'm Justin.
And I'm Kay.
And we are talking about mass hysteria. Indeed, it has been quite an interesting subject, and I hope that with all of our talk of mass hysteria, we are not creating mass hysteria. If so, we're sorry.
Yeah, it's kind of goes along the lines of, I mean, and I know, folks, we're media, but I consider us alternative media. So,
yes.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to really hash it out because you don't really know what is causing it, but at the same time, we're kind of all causing it. So it's one of those things. And, you know, one thing that we really didn't touch on is, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement, the All Lives Matter movement going against each other. It just falls under that same category of mass hysteria, and not just the media feeding into it, but us as a community feeding into it. So it's just hard to determine, you know, are we feeding into it, which is causing it even more, or is it making mass hysteria? What is the actual equal equation, end of the equation, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So super interesting. We could probably go on for hours and hours about this, but we are getting close to the end of the show. So, Kay, before we get off the air for the evening, I wanted to give you a chance, as always, to tell everybody where they can find you, find the show, and anything new that's going on with you and Chad or the network.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Well, I have Deception Detection Radio Network and host with my buddy Chad Riley the Deception Detection Radio show. And then I also have a new broadcast called Soul Preppers. And Deception Detection talks about everything in relation to the Bible, about what's going on today, and covering different mysteries or lies in relation to the prophecies of the Bible. And Soul Preppers is all about getting your soul ready for the end times. How do we get through these days that we're in? How do we get through those birth pangs? And that's what that's all about. And but I have Chad with me on Deception Detection, and he's awesome. So, hey, Chad. And then if you want to find me, you can find me on Facebook under Kay Carswell, or just in the Deception Detection Radio group. If you want to write me, you can write me at Deception Detection Radio, all one word, at yahoo.com. And I love to hear from listeners. A new episode is aired every Sunday of Deception Detection Radio. And I'm trying to do every other Wednesday for Soul Preppers, but I'm still getting into that routine. Okay. So take a listen, like it, subscribe it, and share it. And thanks, guys, for having me on so much. I love Paratruth.
Oh, thank you.
We love Deception Detection as well, and we love you. Thank you. And we're really happy that you guys are expanding a little bit, especially because of the Soul Preppers. You know, one thing that I have been saying over the past couple of weeks, folks, is, you know, the research only starts here. It doesn't end here. So do the research for yourself, and even let us know your thoughts on it. If you find different things that we don't, we still love learning about it. Get in contact with us with that. You know, you can go to our website, paratruthradio.com, and message us there. And just like Kay, we are on Facebook, Twitter. You know, we're all over the place. You can comment on YouTube or on Spreaker. And just reach out to us. We love hearing from our listeners. Kay does as well, so get in contact with her. And, yeah, I think we've pretty much covered what we can on mass hysteria, guys. So that's our mass hysteria episode. Next week, we're going to be kind of going a little more in-depth into the Orson Welles War of the Worlds. And I'm kind of looking forward to this because we just kind of touched the tip of the iceberg with this. So stay tuned for that. Tune into Deception Detection Radio and just do all the research you can from any aspect that you're coming from and get in contact with us, and we would love to talk to you guys. So until next week, folks, where you'll find us, same time, same channel. My name is Justin.
I'm Eric.
And I'm Kay.
Peace.
Do you love Paratruth Radio? Do you feel Paratruth Radio is worth at least $1? Then check out our Patreon account. Go to paratruthradio.com, click on the Contact tab, and click on our Patreon link. And thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode of Paratruth Radio, and you would like to listen to it again, or are interested in listening to any of our past episodes, then you can listen to them on HD at our website, paratruthradio.com.
And you can also find us at Stitcher, Blueberry, TuneIn, iTunes, Spreaker, and YouTube.
And of course, like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter for brand new updates of our show every day.
Saving starts with internet and wireless from Xfinity. Because when you get Xfinity internet and add mobile, you can save up to $400 a year on wireless. Enjoy fast, reliable internet at home and nationwide 5G on the go, included at no extra cost. Get Xfinity internet and mobile together and ask how to get an eligible 5G phone on us. And for a limited time, $300 back. Don't miss out. Go to Xfinity.com/start saving. Call 1-800-XFINITY or visit a store today. Restrictions apply. Savings based on optimized pricing. Actual savings may vary.
¿Por qué esta Coca-Cola de McDonald's sabe tan bien? ¿Será la máquina? ¿Será el popote o el hielo? O quizás soy yo.
No sé, Diego, pero vámonos, ¿no? El ¿por qué esto sabe tan bien deal? Un refresco de cualquier tamaño por $1, solo en el $1, $2, $3 menú de McDonald's. Precios y participación pueden variar, no se puede combinar con cualquier otra oferta o combo mío. Coca-Cola es una marca registrada de The Coca-Cola Company.